Reckless driver tries to kill my cat and pees on my house. So I go into John Wick mode. Wife and I were sitting on our stoop and hanging with the kitten outside after a long day of work, about 8 p.m. The kitty is playing in the snow nearby at the edge of our driveway, which connects to the road. Out of nowhere, a Ford pickup speeds by and swerves into our driveway, narrowly missing a very scared kitty. A skinny younger guy jumps out of the driver's side and urgently walks towards the stoop, his back to the road, and starts to fiddle with his zipper. No fricking way, man. He hasn't seen us sitting there, it's dark out, so I shout, hoping that he won't whip it out right there and tinkle at us. I think he might be a friend of our neighbors at first. They're pretty trashy people. I shout, "Hey man, who the truck are you? You need to slow the frick down." He just says, "Oh, hey." He continues to unzip, and his pathetic eggplant is spurting dribbles of wee-wee in our direction. I notice he's swaying awkwardly. Probably drunk, I think. I say, "Look, mother trucker, kids live here. You can't just expose yourself. Now get the frick out before I call the cops." "Good, call them. I don't care." My wife interjects, "Fine, I don't have anything better to do at the moment." My wife dials the non-emergency number to the station less than 100 yards down the road and puts it on speaker so that this guy can hear we aren't bluffing. Somehow, after a virtual eternity, the guy is finally wrapping up his whiz and holsters his wizard finger. On the phone, wife is telling the police some guy sped into our driveway, barely missed our kitten, and is exposing himself while probably intoxicated. He seems unfazed. Good, tell them that my plate number is… and he gives us the wrong plate number. Slurring the whole time, standing there defiantly with his belt open and hanging limp in front of him. I walk a few steps so I can see his real plate number and read it aloud to my wife. At this point, the guy seems to slowly realize this is really happening, and with his pants unbuckled, he waddles quickly back to the driver's side and peels off down the road, swerving in the snow. My wife is still speaking to the police operator when a badass police charger absolutely roars by in what we assume is in response to our call. She ends said call and we resume our night and kind of chuckle it off while reassuring little Kittler. The next day we call back to see if anything came of it in the end. Turns out they got him just down the road. DUI, underage possession of alcohol, indecent exposure in a school zone, and reckless driving. We caught all of the audio on our front door camera and forwarded it to the officer in charge. They say it might help tack more charges on and will strengthen the others. Good luck, moron, with your no license, fines out the wazoo, and being a registered SEX offender for life. Apparently taking out your President Johnson one time can do that to you. The moral of the story is, if someone warns you to move along, you'd better do it. Also, don't drive drunk, people. There can really be no question as to who the jerk is in this story. Our antagonist was under the influence, endangering just about everyone in the community, publicly weeing and in the process of showing off his equipment to everyone. But the real crime in the eyes of the internet is likely nearly running over the poor, innocent kitty. And doing that without a shred of remorse to boot. This is a sin the people of the internet can and will not stand for. Legal charges be damned. I know that I often give a bit more leniency for people being young and dumb, but that feline endangerment makes this a pretty tough case to defend. I love that he was so absolutely certain that giving the wrong number plate, smugly and with a smile on his face, was the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card. There's no way I wouldn't have been walking up and checking the info against the plate itself. One thing that has stuck out to me across a few stories now is how quick the non-emergency police seem to be in responding to cases like this. I guess there's always the possibility that it's just a quiet night for them on the times our stories happen to take place. You should still call the actual emergency line if you have an actual urgent problem, folks. Don't take what I just said the wrong way. Am I the jerk for getting my interviewer fired? I, a 27-year-old woman, went to a job interview for a potential job opportunity at this one company. The interviewer, we'll call him Eddie, who was in his 30s, welcomed me into the office and had me sit down. The first thing he did was to look at my CV and then started asking me questions that seemed a little too personal and unrelated to the job. Like if I was in a relationship, whether my eye color was real or just lenses. He also asked about how I spend my time when I'm alone and what kind of dudes I like. Like legit personal questions. I don't know if he was testing how I reacted, but I kept it cool until he asked me the question of what my greatest weakness was. I responded by saying, "Keeping up with your inappropriate questions and answering them politely." He looked at me upset and then just told me I had an attitude. It was clear that the interview was over at that point. He told me I didn't get the job, which I found unfair because I don't think I deserve to lose the job over what? Nothing. I got into an argument with him and then told him I was going to report him. I went to speak with the supervisor and filed a complaint against Eddie. The supervisor apologized to me and tried to reschedule a new interview, but I was hesitant about it. Later, I was told that Eddie got fired, which did make me feel guilty. My mum and dad agreed that his questions were inappropriate, but said that I went too far by reporting him and having him fired. Eddie tried contacting me via email, saying that what I did could have been resolved between us and even said he could have arranged a new interview for me. But I ruined it for myself and cost him his job. Am I the jerk? Fricking hell. What is with the friends and relatives of our protagonists sometimes coming out on the side of these exploitative monsters? Eddie 100% deserved to be fired. If he didn't, he wouldn't have been fired from one report or have this story of him believed so readily by his supervisor. If he behaves this brashly and inappropriately with potential hires, then I'm more than willing to believe that he has prior complaints and that this was the final straw. As far as him saying that this could have been resolved between the two of them, I'm guessing that he means face-to-face, with Eddie in the position of power that he had as a potential hirer. No trucking thank you. Please don't doubt yourself, author. Eddie was the jerk here and you did his workplace a favor by getting him sacked. I don't know what your parents are on. Also, you should write to the company that he used the info on your application to contact you, because that's pretty worrying. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Shop owner ends in hot water for being a crook. So some backstory, because there's a few things I need to make clear. This happened 10 years ago. I was 18 and this was during the spring period of my junior year. I wanted to get money for a new mobile phone and a school trip to Austria in order to practice my German. My major was math and German. My dad didn't want to give me the necessary €350 for them, even though I was a 4.0 GPA student, calling me spoiled and selfish and asking me to get a job, just like all the other normal teens at the time. Actually, none of my classmates were working, all were given the world by their parents for being in one of the most elite high schools in the city. But hey, you can't choose your family. So anyway, I got myself a job at a local tobacco shop. It was right across from my block of flats, so it was taking me 2 minutes to run from my flat to the shop. No big deal. The owner of the shop, who we'll call the boss, was a short man in his 40s, with a good demeanor, or so I thought. He owned 4 other shops and needed a workforce. We initially agreed on a payment of €15 a day. I'd work 4 p.m. to 1 a.m., 4 days a week, including Saturdays and Sundays, so I wouldn't miss out on my schooling. He'd pay me once every 2 weeks, and even stated that he'd give me a raise after the first month. The tobacco shop was selling not only tobacco products, but also alcohol, coffee, nuts, candy, chips, and all the products of the Coca-Cola company. It allowed customers to get a cup of coffee which was freshly ground, as well as freshly squeezed orange or grapefruit juice. So I started in the beginning of March. I was working with 2 other people, a 45-ish-year-old fat woman with a whining character who'd usually take the morning shifts from 6 a.m. to 4 p.m., and a 19-year-old beautiful girl. Also, I need to mention that, at the time, the store would share a toilet with a courier service office. This is important for later. There's one more thing I need to add. My country's labor codex states that employees must get a double payment during official holidays and also have at least 12 hours of rest between shifts. This is also important for later. So initially, I was doing fine. I did a couple of days of training. I learned how to operate and clean the coffee machines, the juice machine, the cashier, the receipts. I needed to press enter 3 times to enter the products in the system and take a receipt for these. This is important for later as well. It was quite easy because I operated fast with money and calculations, and overall I was quite trustworthy. I had some small incidents with minors who came asking for beer and cigarettes, but I wouldn't sell the items to them as it's illegal. My colleagues didn't care so much about that, but I was taught to uphold the law by my parents. Some of the frequent customers would also be initially quite annoyed with me as well, because they were expecting from me to know the brand of cigarettes they smoked. Yes, there would be conversations like, 2 packs of my cigarettes. Which brand? Marlboro, you're supposed to know that. Sorry, I've only worked here since recently. Well, I come here every day. You should have remembered me by now. Eventually, this did stop, but I got the stink eye from some of them from time to time, because I'm a sworn non-smoker, and for me all cigarettes are poison, no matter the brand and strength, and they didn't like that. Overall, the job wasn't hard, and I had free Wi-Fi, so I'd often bring in my laptop to watch YouTube videos or listen to music online. At the time, smartphones were expensive as heck, and I had a regular mobile phone. My first 2 fortnightly salaries were okay. I was supposed to get €120 each, and I got something like 110. This was because I'd get random snacks from the shop when I got hungry, and my boss would deduct all from my payment, which was okay. Also, he initially wanted me to add the tip to the cashier. The tip was the change, which is, 5, 10, 20 euro cents, which the customers would often not take, and in the end it would add up to a few euros. But we agreed for it to remain for me, as I pointed out the other employees would also take theirs with them. A month had passed. It was April, the days started to get warmer, and the boss had permission to set up a couple of coffee tables with chairs in front of the shop, so customers would drink their coffee and have a chat with a friend. I was instructed to take the tables and chairs back into the shop at around 8 p.m, and a sign was posted on its front door. So here's where my problems started. After my first month, I approached the boss for a raise. He said I was still a bit rusty and to wait at least 2 more weeks. He also gave me the contract to sign. I never got a copy of it, but since it was my first job, I didn't even know I needed one. I never got a raise either because I was, quote, losing his customers. Absolute tosser. I had good relations with our colleagues at the courier office, but once I had a problem with them because once I took out the trash but forgot to clean the juice machine. I threw the orange remains in the toilet, but one tiny piece of orange seemed to remain on the edge, so I was yelled at by the boss and was fined 10 euros. There were 2 other times I was fined 10 euros, for forgetting to turn the outside lights off and for forgetting to put the daily report in the shop log, but these were my fault. My older coworker would also report me for missing a trash bag or failing to put the items in the fridges in order, but she never took out the trash and never tidied up, so this actually went against her. I never had problems with the other girl. I had problems with some of the local customers, though. I live in a considerably poor neighborhood, and there are different kinds of scumbags who live there. There's this group of 10 people in their late 40s and 50s who are alcoholics and were sitting at the coffee tables until dark as if this was the local pub. When I asked them to leave because it went past 8 p.m. and I had to take the tables into the shop, I was yelled at by the drunks and later by my boss as well because I was, quote, losing frequent customers for being rude and disrespectful to them. Even though I almost ended up in a knife fight with one disgusting animal. The cherry on the cake was the incident with the entitled mother, because she had sent her child to buy her beer and cigarettes, and I refused to sell the items to him because it was against the law. I then got a fine of 30 euros by the boss and was pretty angry about that. In the last week of my work, in the beginning of June, the boss asked me to go and work in other shops, stating that there was a sick employee and he needed me there. It was Friday. I ended up working from 15 to 10 p.m. in the local shop, and then he took me to one of the other shops where I worked from 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. on a Saturday. He then asked me to work from 11 p.m. to 11 a.m. on Sunday and wanted me to be in at 4 p.m. in my local shop, but I just refused because I was exhausted. He threatened to not pay me extra and we agreed to go to the shop at 7 p.m. after I got some sleep. Remember, legally I was supposed to get at least 12 hours between the shifts, but he just told me he didn't care. After this exhausting time, the boss wanted me to change to another shop, but I refused due to my schooling and also because I wanted to remain in my local. But he just got some new workers and said I wouldn't be working until the end of the week. Eventually, I understood that he had terminated my contract and also refused to pay me for the last 2 weeks, nearly 200 euros in total with the extra shifts. There's a few more things which were important. The first is that some of my free days I spent with that 19-year-old girl I mentioned. She was at work and I was in the shop with her, having a chat and being together because she had some mild form of anxiety and didn't want to remain alone. During this time, I noticed she used a different combination to enter the products in the system. Enter, enter, 1, enter. Remember that I had to press enter 3 times in a row. I understood that this would enter the items in the system, but wouldn't send the information to the receipt machine, and this would not get a receipt, and thus the boss wouldn't have to pay VAT for the items. I also understood later that he asked for everyone else to do it. everyone but me, because I wanted everything to be legal. The second thing was there was this new coworker who the boss liked and tried to seduce. He was overtly sexist and only wanted to hire attractive girls, to pay more and to be more clingy with them. I didn't like that at all. So the new coworker ended up being very crooked and actually stole about €400, which the boss blamed me for and said he had camera recordings of. But this was all bullcrap, of course. So after my firing, I was angry and wanted revenge. I spoke to a friend who advised me to report him to the local labor inspection office, which I did. It almost ended with a lawsuit, and I was threatened by my boss that this would cost me dearly, so I backed off with my claim, because I needed a clean legal certificate, because I was going to the Bulgarian Naval Academy in a year and didn't want to jeopardize my future. My dad did get softer on me and paid for my phone and the trip, saying that I earned them, and it wasn't my fault why I didn't have the money, it was my jerk of a boss. Years have passed since then. I got discharged due to medical reasons and came back to my hometown. I got a new job and was living with my father until I got better wages. The shop was still owned by this absolute prick, and he was going around town in a very expensive car, and I even saw him once smoke Cohiba cigars, which usually go between 15 and €20 a piece. In the meantime, he was still paying 15 to €20 a day to the shop assistants, and I understood he was desperate for workers. So I decided to turn all of this against him. I knew some of the workers as we grew up together, and they'd complained about how much of a crook he was. I hated him for being so cheap to his employees and so large in personal spending. We started telling people how bad of a boss he was and to stay away from him. Word got out, and he not only started losing assistants, but no one would want to ask him for a job. One time, the police were nearby. Someone had broken into one of the shop's large windows with a stone and stolen all the cigarettes. The losses were about €1,000 from what I understood. The boss also had to pay for a new window, and that would cost him more. Apparently, he had made a lot of people angry. I also suggested to some of his former employees, who I did know vaguely, to file individual reports against him in the local labor inspection office, like I did all those years ago. I explained that they'd definitely rattle his cage. A lot of reports went in, and I understood there was a major inspection of all the shops. They could also use my information, but I asked them to take me off the case. I didn't want any recompense, only to watch him burn. Eventually, the boss disappeared. What I understood was that he ended up with a lot of problems because he was charged with mistreatment of his personnel, violation of the labor codex, felony tax evasion, and a number of other charges. So far as I know, he's somewhere in the UK now, while the business is handled by his brother and wife. His shops were cut in half due to a lack of workers, and I understood they were about to close another one as well. His business is not as successful as before, and I also understood it's being frequently inspected. Now, he didn't end up in jail, or at least I don't know about it if he did, but I don't care. Sooner or later, everyone gets what they deserve, and I'll not be the person to put him behind bars, but most of my fellow conspirators still greet me with smiles and give me updates on the case. They also thank me for giving them the idea of filing reports and using their rights. I guess I'm the mastermind behind all of this, and to be honest, I'm extremely happy with that, when he gets what he deserves from being a crook and a piece of trash. And the best part is, I just got to sit back and watch other people do it. In short, I had a disgusting crook of a boss during my first job. He exploited me and the other employees. I suggested from them to file reports against him, and he got into a lot of trouble for this. Oh, and yes, I know I used euros for currency. Bulgaria uses levs, but €1 is about 2 levs, so I was able to do the math pretty easily. Well, frankly, I think it wouldn't have been the biggest shame in the world for this boss to end up in the clinker. In fact, he'd probably have fit in well there. It sounds like he was an absolute monster who flaunted the law, got rich, and then ended up justifiably getting what was coming to him. There were about 30 or 40 times where you probably should have reported him to someone before your first attempt, but I won't begrudge you for backing off either. I don't know how reliable the cops or courts are in your Bulgarian town or city, and that the country has had some problems with corruption. The fact that your parents didn't think that you should go after him either is probably a fair marker of your chances. So it was honestly okay to just cut your losses and get him later. Also, for all his talk about how your honorable nature was costing him customers, he seems like the kind of guy who'd throw you under the bus and claim ignorance if he was found to be doing illegal crap in his stores. What an absolute steaming pile of doo-doo. I'm glad you got to watch everything fall apart for him. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. Or if you want to check out some great music, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, give Am I the Genius a shot. Everything linked in the description.